Hey everyone, thanks for stopping in for the Q&A portion of the screen making seminar. This is Kevin Kauth, Chromaline. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to take a look at the screen making video that I posted last night. And if you've got questions, this is a great time to drop them into the chat right there. Drop in, say, let me know that you're there. And any questions that you have on anything that you saw during the seminar, we can definitely address now. Hey, Michaela. Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, this is a little strange. I'm used to doing this in front of people. It's a little bit more interaction back and forth when I can see who's out there and see everybody and see the questions that you have. But obviously, the way things are right now, it just made sense to try to do something like this to answer any questions that people had, from where I'm at, trying to help from where I'm at. Obviously, I'd love to be out there and working with everybody in their screen shops, but unfortunately, that's just not an option at the moment. Hey, Tim. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad the video helped. I plan on doing more of those. I'll probably do some more product-specific videos going forward. Do a little bit more live kind of interaction stuff like this as well. But I can do some more videos on anything. So anybody that's got questions, if you've got suggestions for videos, drop them in the comments, and we can, I can definitely address those going forward. Let's see here. So Michaela, you've got a question here. Curious about the UV sensitive lights I've seen in the yellow shop light covers here at Chromaline. Do you have any suggestion for suppliers that sell those yellow covers? Yeah, actually I do. Usually I recommend encapsulite.com. So that's encapsulite.com. And at Encapsulite, they have either the sleeves for fluorescent tubes. They've got film that can actually be cut and fit into the light fixtures. Or I believe they actually have the yellow bulbs as well. But they have a section for screen printing yellow light safe filters and sleeves and films, whatever you need for your light fixtures. That's the best place to get it. So Encapsulate is where I typically recommend people to go. Great question. Let's see here. Yeah, and I mean, it can be questions about anything. It doesn't have to be, so much as what you saw in the seminar itself. But, if there's something that you would like me to address that I didn't talk about during the seminar or any of that kind of stuff, I'm happy to chime in on all of that as well. What's my favorite exposure unit? So my favorite exposure unit is any metal halide single point system. Douthit makes a great one. That's the one that I typically recommend is Douthit's single point metal halide system. Yeah, they're expensive. The bulbs are expensive. They need to be replaced yearly. But as far as quality is concerned, you're just not going to be able to get a better unit than just a single point metal halide. Hey, Susie. Yeah, I'm happy to help. I'm glad you learned something from the video. Tim, use the Newman frame to stretch mesh. I let it relax and retentioned it over a few days. I was using Saudi 158 mesh. I got it to 40 newtons. I glued the mesh to a static frame and cut it out. The tension dropped 34 newtons. The edges of the aluminum frame are bowed. What problems will cause this? So, Tim, what I would recommend is bringing it up to tension. And I'm not sure. So you had it relaxed and retentioned it over a few days. Yeah, it could have to do with the profile of the frame itself, that it's bowing in like that. So there's systems out there that actually will pre-bow those frames. where it actually will pull out on the frame itself when you're actually doing that. But you can't do that obviously with a static frame. But if you, with some of the clamping systems that are out there, it actually pre-bows and pulls on the frame, so that when you have the mesh at tension, let it sit and relax at tension for a given amount of time. I typically say an hour is a good time, hour or 2 hours, to let it sit at tension. But something with those where it pre-bows and pulls out on it, when you release it, then it comes down to where it normally should be. So if you're starting from square one at tension, glue it in, it's going to pull in on the frames, especially if they're not as rigid. So you might need a thicker frame. You might need a more rigid frame. GSF frames is who I typically recommend for frames. They've got great frames. They're very rigid, but that's that. Bowing cause the issues when printing? Not necessarily, but it can. The bowing, if it depends on how much it's bowing. I've seen screens that there's just no way around it. So large format graphic printers, they've got screens that are 110 inches wide, and they're gonna bow, somewhere between like 3 to 5 inches where it actually is bowing. So you've got a nice arc in that obviously is unwanted, but sometimes it's just the nature of the frame itself. But like I said, the profile, how rigid that frame is, will definitely counter effect on that as well. But yeah, check out GSF. No problem, Tim. But yeah, if you can somehow pre-bow your frames, pull out on the frames, that'll help so when it comes back in as well. So, Michael, can you discuss some of the benefits of the new auto coating machine introduced at Long Beach? Yes, absolutely. So basically, using an auto coater will coat screens just like how you're coating them by hand, but it's going to do it far more consistent. You can adjust the pressure, the speed, all of the variables you can adjust and have set so that when you're coating with an auto coater, consistency is key. Consistency when you're making screens, if every screen is exactly the same, your exposure times are going to stay the same, and you're just going to be able to have far more consistency in that screen room. That's what an auto coater does. It doesn't speed up your process, but it makes it far more consistent. And yes, Michaela, you can use any emulsion with the ChromaCoat 20. You can use any emulsion with any of the auto coaters that are out there, obviously. But it just helps reduce any of the variations and the variables, and helps make it a little bit more consistent. So you've got an idea of what is going to happen with each one of those screens. Yeah, good questions, people. Thanks. Yeah, like I said, it's hopefully all you guys are doing well out there, staying healthy, hanging in there. I know that it's a hard time for some of our customers, but we're doing our best. Yeah, no worries, Dave. Jump on in anytime. If you got questions, shoot them out to me. I'm happy to address any questions you got. But yeah, hopefully everybody's doing good, staying safe, staying healthy. We're doing a good job getting material made, and we're still shipping. We're actually working and sending out samples of our polyester that we actually use in our inkjet films. Some companies are testing it for some of the face shields and different things of that nature too. So everybody's doing their part to get through this and help as best as possible. Are there any advantages or disadvantages using wood frames versus metal frames? Is that even a thing? Yes. The best thing for wood frames is a bonfire. You shouldn't be using wood frames. I know there's a lot of them out there. People still use them. They're cheap. But with wood frames, they absorb a lot of the chemicals that you're using. So they're going to warp over time. They're not going to stay the same. Like what Tim was saying earlier with how the frames are bowing and losing tension. You're going to have a lot of that. You're going to have a lot of tension loss with wood frames. And it's just an old system. So definitely aluminum frames are far better. They're far more rigid. The chemicals aren't going to affect the screens as much as well. What's your recommended LPI for a 230 mesh screen? So that really goes down to your artwork And as I mentioned in the seminar, the best thing about that is the smallest dot or the smallest line that you're trying to resolve should cover 2 threads in a mesh opening. So what I typically like to do is, if you're using films, print off the films and put it on a stretched screen that doesn't have emulsion on it. Put a loop on that, right on there, and take a look and see, does the smallest dots that are on that film, do they cover 2 threads and a mesh opening? If so, great, then you're good. But for the most part, I typically recommend people that are printing with autos 55 LPI, and people that are printing manually 45 LPI. That's a good rule of thumb. You can obviously go past that, but for ease of use and everything like that, that's typically what I recommend. How often would you recommend people replacing their coders? Good question, Dave. So, I mean, as long as they're cared for and they're not being dropped or any of that kind of stuff, really, they should last a long time. I've got a coating trough that I've been using for many, many years, and it still works great. The biggest thing is if it gets dropped, if there's a ding in it, that's the time to replace that coater. You can't fix it. If you get a little ding in it, you can't sand out the ding or any of that kind of stuff with sandpaper, emery cloth. I know people try to do it all the time, but then you're going to change the profile of that scoop coater. So obviously in the scoop coater, you've got a sharp edge and you've got a rounded edge. But if you try to start sanding that out, you're definitely going to change the profile, and you're going to have a thinner deposit versus a thicker deposit on the other side of the screen. But if you take care of them, they're going to last a really long time. Susie, do you have additional webinars we can watch? Do you have people that can train us in our shops? Yes. Depending on where you're located. So I cover the Midwest. I cover the 17 states in the central portion of our country. And I work with all of my distributors, getting out and working with people like yourselves in your shops. That's typically what I love to do, is getting out there and working with you guys in your shops. But like I said, right now, obviously that's not an option. Right now, I don't have any more webinars that I've done. On our website, chromaline.com, we've got a whole entire page of all different really good training videos. I would recommend taking a look at those. But I will continue to do more of this kind of stuff as well. Even after we get through all of this stay-at-home order stuff, I still plan on doing more video content like this and getting out. And this is a good way of getting out in front of you guys without getting out in front of you guys. But if you've got ideas or you've got things that you want me to address in future videos, shoot me ideas. I'm happy to address anything that you want in future videos. But yeah, I'd be happy to do any of that stuff. Do you sell the magnifier you see of the threads? So yeah, those are the loops. We don't sell them. Shoot me an email and I'll get your contact information. I'd be happy to ship you one. That's no problem. Michaela, hoping that summer events and workshops are still taking place. What events, workshops will you be participating in next? Obviously we don't know how long this is all going to last. Hopefully we get to the downslope soon and we can start getting out there. I've got a lot of shows that we've done are being postponed. Some of them don't have firm dates for when they're being postponed until, but I'll be at all 3 of the DAX shows. Well, we already did the Kansas City, so I'll be at the other 2 that are being postponed. We'll be doing one at Empire's Partners in Print. They'll be having a kind of a trade show event going on in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And then I'll be at the other ISS shows moving forward as well. Susie, my email is kkauth@chromaline.com. Here, I'll put that in here too. Yeah, Michaela, Partners in Printing. That's the one that's going to be put on by SGIA in partnership with one of our customers, Empire. That'll be in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It'll be a little trade show. They've done it over the past, just at their facility with a lot of the vendors that they use. But this now is kind of evolved into something different, and SGIA is coming in and working with them on that. I know they've got a big concert planned with a lot of big acts and stuff like that. So I really hope that it still goes on, but that'll be sometime this summer in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I haven't heard if that's been postponed or any of that yet. But yeah, you should be able to find that on the SGIA website. Yeah, these are all good questions. I appreciate you guys jumping on here and taking some time. Dave, I found that aluminum frames today are not as strong as what they were 5 years ago. As such, I find when customers have them restretched, they don't hold tension as long as a brand new screen. Yes, I do agree with that as well. Screens over the years, the cost of screens have come down significantly, and part of that is the market's drive to have cheaper supplies, cheaper frames, all that good stuff. And one of the ways that screen manufacturers have countered that is obviously making thinner profiles. No, they're a lot lighter nowadays too. So there's benefits to that the screens are a lot lighter. I mean, these aluminum frames that they're making nowadays are really nice and light, where some of them that I've used years ago were pretty heavy. But yeah, you're right. They don't last as much, but or as long. But also, you can get new ones a lot cheaper than you could at one point in time too. So if you start to get screens that just aren't holding tension, it might be time to retire that frame and get yourself a new one. Now they're quite a bit cheaper than they once were. Susie, where do you find additional training that you were talking about? So as far as like coming into your shop and working with you, if you reach out to one of our distributors on Chromaline.com, we've got a whole list of all of our distributors. If you're already purchasing from one of our distributors, reach out to them, talk to your distributors, tell them that you're interested in us coming out and working with you. I've done a lot of screen making seminars over the past couple of years, live all over the place with my distributors. So that's something that I want to get back to. Obviously, once again, we're not able to get out and do that stuff right now, but I do plan on doing more of the live screen making seminars, similar to what I put out there online yesterday, but more in person with you guys. So that we'll be doing. But yeah, getting into your shop, just talk to your distributors. Ask them, tell them, I want some support, and tell them you want support from their vendor reps too. And all of us manufacturers, that's what we do. We go around and work with our distributors and help with technical problems. Michaela, most ideal print to use with AccuFilm. Most of the Epson printers that are out there work great with any of the inkjet films that we have. So AccuJet is by far our most popular inkjet film. It's the most economical film that we have, and it's extremely high quality. But any of the Epson inkjet printers that are out there are typically what I'll recommend. The most popular, the larger format size, the most popular right now is the Epson T3270. That can do rolls up to 24 inches wide. We're on the smaller side, the P400, which can do rolls up to 13 inches wide. Those are the two that I think are the best. Kevin, feel free to mention too that Chromaline will do a drawing from the people asking questions today. I'll choose a lucky winner to receive a swag bag. Ooh, that's sweet. So Michaela is actually in our marketing department, and yeah, feel free to, like I said, shoot me an email with all your contact information. I'd be happy to get some training materials out to you, loops, exposure calculators, all that good stuff. And Michaela's happy to hook you up with a sweet swag bag too. But yeah, that feel free to drop us a line anytime, emails, phone calls. That's what we're there for. Great. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, I'm gonna do more of this stuff. Um, this is the first time, kind of a test run almost for me. So it's like I said, it's a lot different doing this where I'm just talking to a camera. I can't see you guys out there, and everybody's starting to get a little stir crazy, and everybody needs a little bit of human interaction. So doing these kind of things is good, and we can. It's easier to address some of the topics that you really have questions on. Yeah, Tim. So we've got a couple different versions. So the exposure calculator itself is just this piece of film right here, and it utilizes the first few steps of that Stouffer scale. So it actually is going to involve the film, the resolution of the film itself, and that Stouffer scale. So it does a few things more than what the Stouffer scale does itself. We actually have these little test strips as well, and these little test strips, ours are just the first 10 steps of the Stouffer scale because that's all you really need when you're determining your screens. But when you're doing this is just giving you the hardness of your emulsion. It's a good quality control tool, but actually determining your exposure times, I like to use the exposure calculator to really dial in your exposure times versus the little Stouffer scales like these. But yeah, Tim, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to get you one of those exposure calculators. Dave, can you maybe explain the confusion some have on RIP software versus separation software? Many shops I interact with don't feel they need a RIP. Yeah, so the RIP software itself doesn't really have anything to do with the separations. A lot of people do get confused with that. But the RIP software itself is really the brains of the printer. It's going to dictate how much ink is being laid down on the films, your halftones, the angle of your lines, all of the, basically, like I said, it's the brains of the printer. And so you can really get good, rich prints, dark black prints with the RIP software. Whereas if you're just printing without RIP software, yeah, you can do separations, but chances are you're not going to get as good of resolution. You're not going to have as good of Dmax, Dmin for the density of your prints. So yeah, that's a good question as well. Tim, I've been using the Chromaline because of the humidity issues and other emulsions, and it solved the problem. The film sticking to the screen. That's great to hear. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we developed the Chromaline. It's developed exactly for that reason. With people that are having humidity problems, which everybody does in the summer, it's definitely a big thing. We've tested it in our humidity chamber that we have in our lab, almost at as high as it goes. It's almost at 100% humidity, and the film just comes right off. Whereas some of the other products that we have and our competitors have, it almost wants to adhere right to that screen, and that's really because of the water that's in the screen itself is drawing out and pulling the ink out of the film itself. But yeah, we've added something to that Chromaline to help solve those problems. So I'm glad it's working well for you. Yeah, Susie, I'm happy to do that. Thanks, I appreciate it. Keep an eye out for more of this stuff in the future. Another dude, do you recommend coating screens at an angle or straight up and down? Seems to be both suggestions out there, but I'd be interested in your input. Yeah, so I mean, what I typically do with the screen is it doesn't so much matter. It kind of helps for you to tip it back a little bit, just so you've got a little bit more control. But then what I do with the scoop coater is make good contact with the wall, and so the emulsion will run down. Once it makes good contact all the way across the edge, I kind of tip it back at that point, and then I'll coat the screens. Once I get to the top, I kind of shimmy like that as I scrape it and off the top. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, as far as the screen being exactly straight upright or tipped back like that, it doesn't really matter as long as you've got good control of the scoop coater itself, where you've got good pressure, good speed, everything like that. But it shouldn't really matter if you've got the screen on an angle or if it's straight up and down, just as long as you've got good control. With all of the auto coaters that are out there, the screen sits in that auto coater perfectly upright. But once again, you've got more control with the auto coater that you can dial in and take out a lot of those variables too. But a lot of people will hold the screen back on an angle and kind of rock it when they coat up as well. Yeah, happy to do that, Tim. Yeah, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to get that out to you. Yeah, Dave. I shimmy and I shimmy the coater trough, the coating trough as well. This is not an instructional dance video for today, but maybe future videos can do some instructional dance. Absolutely. Not keeping the coater right up against the screen might help with not dumping too much emulsion on there. Yeah, it definitely does, because now you've got more control over that as well. The dams are there so it doesn't run out, but with the dam itself, these edges, I typically go right up against the screen itself and then tip it back when you're actually doing the coating. You're right. It should help so there's not as thick of a coat along the edges. But if you do get a thick coat along those edges, a lot of times I'll just take a business card or something like that and just scrape off those two thick sides on the edges. That'll help where the screens will dry a lot faster, and also won't have you won't have issues with exposure on those outer edges as well. Yeah. Great. DIY screen coating stand is really helpful. Do you have any plans or designs people could request? So we had one at one point in time. The problem with the one that we had, it was pretty expensive and people didn't really pay for it. But one thing that I like to recommend, so more of a DIY kind of screen holder. Everybody's got a table in their screen room. What I like to do is take a 2x4, screw it down into the table itself and one into the wall, and then you can actually fit your screen right in between those two 2x4s or 1x1, whatever, just a piece of wood that's screwed into both of those. That way the screen sits inside there and it won't kick out and it won't move up because it's kind of stuck in there at the right level. That way you can use both hands when you're scoop coating with definitely more control with two hands. Does having a fit gasket on the emulsion make printing white ink on hoodies easier? Yes, to a certain point it does. But the biggest thing is, the emulsion itself is about 10 to 20% of that overall thickness. Now, you don't want it to be too thick because now the ink isn't going to release through the mesh itself. But having a good 10 to 20% thickness over the mesh is all you're really after. So the thickness really goes back to the mesh counts that you're using. If you're using a lower mesh count, your fabric thickness is much thicker. So it really goes back to more of the mesh that you're selecting than coating it much thicker. But a more open, thicker mesh is going to help print that, be closer to that one-hit white that everybody's after. That is not really a thing. Everybody's trying to get that one-hit white, but most of the time it goes down to the screen making versus the ink itself. And for the most part, 80% of that or 90% of that fabric thickness is the mesh itself, not so much the emulsion. Jared, some people have said the rounded side is just the part you hold. I've heard people say that too. But you said mostly rounded side. It really matters what you feel comfortable with. Excuse me. It's just a little dry. Don't worry. Yeah. So really, it comes down to what you're more comfortable with. The rounded side just puts more emulsion down faster. Dave Garrick is on here, and he is not a fan of the rounded side. So it really goes down to what you're what you're used to. I would say the vast majority of the people in the United States and North America are typically coating screens with the rounded edge, actually. Other regions in Asia, I would say primarily they're doing it with the sharp edge. It really goes down to the emulsion you're using, the solid content in the emulsion, to really get to that thickness that you're after. With like Chroma Blue, a 1-in-1 with the rounded edge, everything from say 156 and below really puts you right in that 10 to 20% range. But above 156 on your 230s, 305s, I use the sharp edge 1-in-1 just because it is so high in solids. If you were to use a 1-in-1 with the rounded edge, it'd be too thick of a stencil to resolve the really fine details that you're after. And the reason why you're using those higher mesh counts is because you're after those really fine details to begin with. But yeah, like I said, it really comes down to personal preference. As long as you're getting the thickness of the stencil that you're after, as long as you're getting to that target, that's all that matters. You just might have to do far more passes with the sharp side to get to that target. So if you can do a 1-in-1 with the round side and you have to do a 2-in-2 with the sharp side, you're saving on your arm and you're doing half the passes in a given day. Yeah, but no, great questions. Great questions. We've got, not everybody has these. These are the thickness gauges that I use. It's a Fisher isoscope. A lot of times I'll go out with our distributor reps and work with our customers, and we can bring these kind of tools into your shop and work with you and tell you exactly where you're at and if we can make recommendations going forward for you as well. But yeah, you can get cheaper thickness gauges out there. They're just not as accurate as something like this one, and the one that I use is about $800. But like I said, it's nothing that I would recommend every shop needs. If somebody like myself or one of my distributors can come in and work with you and take those thickness measurements for you, then that a 2-in-2 with this emulsion is this thickness. And as long as you stay doing everything consistent, then you can expect consistent results. Yeah. Yep. Susie. Yep. No worries. It's perfect. Yeah. Like I said, there's tools out there, like the Fisher isoscope, and I can do more videos where I'm physically measuring screens and stuff like that. If that's stuff that people are interested in seeing how that whole process works. But essentially, what we're doing is we're measuring the thickness of the mesh, and then we're measuring the thickness of the mesh and emulsion, and then subtracting the two, and that's actually your emulsion over mesh, your EOM. So where we're saying you want it to be 10% of your overall thickness, if you measure the mesh and emulsion together and it's 100 microns, when you subtract the two of those, you should be right around 10 microns to 20 microns. Yeah. How do you feel about some emulsion manufacturers promoting the use of emulsion prep product for the mesh, not just a proper degreasing? Well, honestly, with direct emulsion, you shouldn't have to use a mesh prep. Those really just help to clean things off the screens, and it changes the surface properties of the mesh itself. It makes it so things adhere more to it. So like our Chroma Wet that we have is exactly like those mesh preps that are out there, but they just market theirs towards a different use. When we're using our Chroma Wet, we're typically only suggesting it with people that are using capillary films, because what it does is it just makes it so the water sheets down on the screen, so it just is a little bit more even coverage. Does it help? Yeah, it helps with direct emulsion, but I don't think it's necessary, in my opinion. I know that there's people in this industry that think that that's the magic bullet for a lot of certain printing applications, but I don't think it's necessary as long as your screens are cleaned well enough and that you've got a good product, a good emulsion, everything is exposed properly, you've got a good EOM. you shouldn't really need to use those mesh preps that are out there. Yeah, Susie, I'd be happy to do some of those as well. Yeah, I'll do some videos of how I would test screens myself, and just kind of go through exactly what I would recommend for testing your screens. And you can kind of, if you have something like, like the Fisher Isoscope, any of those thickness gauges, you can kind of start like a diary almost, and track what your screens are doing. I recommend, your tensions as well. And there's a lot of different things that you can use, and for tools out there. I can definitely go through my entire screen toolkit, and what each thing is used for and how to use them. I don't think everything is necessary for every shop, but it really does help dial some of those things in. Okay, great. Yeah, again, I appreciate you guys all taking the time and jumping on here. These are a lot of great questions. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a lot more of this kind of stuff. I'm going to do a lot more pre-recorded things, like what Susie's asking for, as far as how to use some of these screen making tools. And I'm, there's a lot more things that I've got cooking in my mind for content that I want to put out there for you guys. So keep an eye out for that stuff. If anybody's got any more questions at the moment, I'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, I can let you get back to it. All right. Well, yeah. As I mentioned, if you've got additional questions, please reach out to me, Kauth at chromaline.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have additional to what we've addressed here today. And if you want to shoot me your contact information, if you want anything, if you're looking for exposure calculators, or like we've got our troubleshooting guide right here, which just goes through a lot of the common screen problems that people have, and the causes and some of the solutions. I'd be happy to get a lot of this stuff out to any of you guys. So like I said, reach out to me. Thanks again for stopping by, and have yourself a great day. Stay safe.